Again, when Jews are murdered, the mainstream media attacks the settlers. Why in the name of everything good and right can they not just call a Palestinian terrorist a Palestinian terrorist? I'm Joshua. This is the Israel Guys. Stay tuned for the rest. Welcome back to the Israel Guys, where we believe in a world of Jew hatred and anti-Israel propaganda. You should have a direct connection to the land and people of Israel. Guys, we're digging in today. Why in the world is the world's response to terrorism in Israel? Jews have died, and their response is to attack the Jewish people. Why? Okay, well, we're just going to say, who's the real enemy? That's our question right now. Who is the real enemy, and who's getting this wrong? What are the headlines after Jews are murdered in the streets by terrorist organizations? Who's to blame? Well, obviously it's the terrorist organizations, but why on the world's mainstream are we not seeing this portrayed? Why are we seeing an attack to the Jewish people and not to the terror organizations that are attacking the people of Israel? Let's set it straight. The Hamas Charter, and every other of the 20 terrorist organizations that are working throughout Judea and Samaria all have similar charters. We'll just give a quick overview. They're anti-Semitic, they're anti-West, they're radical Islamist in their outlook. It stresses the Hamas ideological commitment to destroy the state of Israel through holy war, jihad. This is the overview of the Hamas Charter. And as I said, the 20 other terrorist networks that are working throughout Judea and Samaria all have the same goal in mind. They want to see the people of Israel destroyed. They want to see all the Jews pushed into the sea. They want to see no state of Israel and the whole thing taken over by a radical Islamist regime that will rid the entire area of its Jewish population. Now, you may think that's a little bit overkill. No, that's exactly what's happening here. And you may be stunned to find out a recent survey that was just taken that says 66%. This is a Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research. Now, this is a Palestinian survey. This makes them look absolutely evil, but they did it themselves. So let's just say that this is in line with their goals of what the common person throughout the Palestinian Arab world, Palestinian Arab area wants to see happen. 66% believe that Israel will not celebrate their 100th anniversary. They believe they will achieve their goal in the next 15 years. They believe they'll achieve their goal, in the next 25 years. They're going to achieve their goal within a very short amount of time. They believe Israel is just celebrating its 75th anniversary. Now, what? They really believe they're going to accomplish this that quickly. Okay, well, let's just look at the next stat here. The next stat says 52% support violent struggle against the state of Israel. 52% of the public support the terrorist actions. They support one of these terrorist factions against. That's the majority of the Palestinian Arab people within the land of Israel support terror against Jews. That's why when the Jews were murdered, the 4 Jewish men were murdered horrifically nearby here. They were passing candies in the streets with no one arrested, no one saying that's evil, you should not do this. This is the real problem. Now that I've outlined that, and we have the source, the real problem for continued bloodshed and harm against the Jewish people is not the Israeli settlers. The Israeli settlers are not rampaging through Arab towns, killing Arabs. Arabs don't have security fences around their communities for a good reason. They don't need them. Okay? Now, we're going to dive in now to what the mainstream says is actually going on. The mainstream, of course, has it completely flipped on its head and wrong. New York Times headline says Israeli settlers attack Palestinian towns, just like it's blatant. They're attacking Palestinian towns. Now, this is in response to 4 Jews that were just murdered by Palestinian Arab terrorists. And the headlines now, surfacing all the mainstream headlines, are now things like this. Israeli settlers attack Palestinian towns. The ABC says, headline, Israeli settlers storm into Palestinian town in the West Bank as Israeli airstrikes escalate crackdown. Haaretz, Israel's leftist news, says Palestinians shot dead as dozens of Jewish settlers torch homes, vehicles, and West Bank. Now, Palestinians shot dead. Now they're shifting the whole thing away from the 4 Israelis that were murdered and onto a situation that happened in an Arab town as in a response. So then they're taking the riots that happened after the fact and making the headline out of the after the fact riots upon the actual deed that caused the whole ruckus to start with was Islamic jihad against the Jews. Again, denying the fact of the real problem and trying to refocus it. The response of those that are fed up with terror against their own people. Now, we'll continue with the headlines. CBS News, Israeli settlers rampage through Palestinian town as violence escalates in the occupied West Bank. NBC says death tolls rise as violence in the West Bank continues. AP says Israeli settlers storm into Palestinian towns in West Bank as Israeli strike escalates crackdown. All of these opening headlines of every one of these articles talks about hundreds of Israelis storming Palestinian towns in the occupied West Bank. This is the start off of every one of these articles. Now, what's misleading about this? What's misleading is that now everyone that's never been here doesn't understand what's going on, thinks that now Israel is some sort of African civil war where town against town are going nuts on each other. No, that's not what's actually happening here. There's one side that's a terror entity that is attacking a civilized citizens, Western culture at its finest, God-loving, family-loving, good culture, and these Jewish communities are being attacked by radical Islamic terrorist organizations. And this is the response of the international media. There's a problem here. Hey guys, we'll be right back. But first, imagine a world where hope is restored and shattered lives are rebuilt. This is the mission of the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund. Meet the Dahans, a typical Israeli family torn apart by terrorism. One night, their lives were forever changed as gunfire pierced their car, taking the life of their 8-year-old daughter. The aftermath left the family on the verge of collapse. That's when the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund stepped in. Through their whole family therapy program, the Dahans found healing and strength. Now we have the chance to help 35 families just like them. Your donation to Shiloh will provide tailored therapy programs valued at $2,000, saving families on the brink of falling apart. Together, we can make a difference. Click the link in the description below to be a part of rebuilding the lives of Israeli families. Your compassion can transform despair into hope, darkness into light. And I will say this problem doesn't only exist to the international media. Unfortunately, the United States State Department also joins in. They're confused. Who is the enemy? After listening to me for a few minutes, you've understood that there's an enemy, and it's called Islamic Jihad against the Jews, right? But even Thomas Nides, U.S. ambassador to Israel, he says this in I'll quote him on his Twitter. Quote, deeply concerned about the civilian deaths and injuries that have occurred in the West Bank these past 48 hours, including that of minors, praying for their families as they mourn the loss of loved ones or tend to those injured. What is the problem? Now, just a quick overview. Maybe you didn't understand what was wrong with this. He's sending condolences also, not only to the 4 Jews that were murdered and their families. He's sending condolences to the families of the terrorist. What's wrong with that? He's putting there's an equivalence here between the death of terrorists and the death of Jews. What's the difference? I've already outlined this 100 times. The difference is that one is a terror organization dedicated to wiping the Jewish presence off the face of the planet, destroying the state of Israel, and the other is not a faction at all. It's not a terror faction. It's not against Arabs. It's just living peacefully. They're citizens of the state of Israel, living wonderful lives, trying to establish families and have a good life here in the land, the miraculous land of Israel. Now, who's the problem? Again, the U.S. State Department has to get it straight. We don't send condolences to murderers when they're killed. That's the whole world appreciates when evil is taken out. We have to understand who the real enemy is. Let's get it right. Who is the real enemy? when you hear on the news and you hear all these things, you hear Thomas Knight, you hear the State Department, you hear the Biden administration, you hear those mainstream headlines coming out, what are they not saying? You will never hear the words on those networks and on those platforms, Palestinian terrorist. Why? Because they're not willing to state the facts. You will never hear the words Palestinian terrorist. Just doesn't exist. They have other lingo. You will hear right now, you type in the news, you will hear Palestinian gunman. Well, that has a different ring to it. It's misleading. It's one person. It's a little kind of niche over on the side. No, it's 65% of the Palestinian public that are Palestinian gunmen. That's a terrorist state. It's a terror-run entity against the Jewish people. So when you say Palestinian gunman, you're trying to effectively change the what people are understanding. You never say, you'll hear all the time, settler violence, settler violence, settler violence, settler violence, all over the news. And even after Arabs killed Jews, you'll still hear the word settler violence, because there's going to be a response to that. Because if someone's killed, that means the military and those security factions failed the job, right? Because if someone dies, those security infrastructure that's in place failed, and therefore a Jewish citizen died. That means there's going to be pushback to that. They're going to say, please provide us more security. And if you don't, we're going to have some, we're going to push back, right? Not saying that these Jewish people that went in and burned cars, they weren't shooting people, burning fields. I'm not validating that, but this is a response. It's called putting pressure. It's protesting the fact that there's not security for Jewish citizens inside Judea and Samaria. The free run of terrorists to get gas at a gas station that I'm at is a problem. And that's what needs to be raised. The international headlines should be stating, terrorists run freely throughout Judea and Samaria. 800,000 Israelis are at risk to these terrorist factions. That would be a proper response to a situation like this. How is it that terrorists can just drive up to a gas station and shoot people? This is horrific. There should be, and that's why Jewish people are protesting. Everybody in the world understands what protest is these days. There's protests all over the place. They're protesting the fact that they're not safe in their own country. And that, to me, is worthy of protesting. Now, how those protests go down, I would not condone, but you have to understand the reason behind those that are protesting throughout Judea and Samaria. They're protesting because they don't feel safe in their own land. Now, you have to understand that from this perspective. And why, on the international community, again, do you hear settler violence incessantly? You'll never hear Palestinian violence, and you'll never hear Palestinian terrorist. You will hear little phrases kind of pulled it down. They'll say things like Palestinian gunman. Now, let's conclude. Let's get it right. Who's the enemy? 65% of the Palestinian public that supports terrorism. That's the enemy. We have identified the problem. We've identified the issue. It's 65% of the Palestinian public that either is or supports terrorist activity against Jewish people. That's the enemy, and it has to be addressed. And Jewish people must be able to live safely in their own land now more than ever. 800,000 Jewish people deserve to be protected against radical Islamic terrorists. And they need my support, and they need your support to provide security for 800,000 Jewish citizens living here. They don't need the international world bashing them for wanting to live safe and secure lives, okay? The Jewish settlers. The Jewish settlers are a part of the solution, not the breakdown of all the world would like to blame them for. No, the Jewish Pioneer Front here is an incredible pioneer front that's bringing peace and restoring the land of Israel. The terrorist factions and the 65% of that Palestinian Islamic way, the jihad that's being produced here, is bringing about bloodshed. It's bringing about destruction to these communities, and it has to be said that way. So, as we finalize, guys, let's get it right. Let's push some pushback to these lefties. Let's push some pushback to Thomas Knides. It's unacceptable for Thomas Knides, the State Department, to get it wrong. That's following the tune of the United Nations. We can't follow that tune. We stand up for Jewish life. We stand up for Jewish people to live safely in their own homeland. Guys, tune out the fake news and tune into what is actually happening here in the Heartland. We'll be back every Monday through Friday with a direct connection to land and people of Israel.